Hello, welcome to this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast.
I'm very excited. I'm elated. Just thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. Excited for this game week. This camp has been outstanding. The boys are in a really, really good place physically, mentally, emotionally. They're just excited to hit somebody else. It's been a long camp. We've been in what we like to call the bunker, the no social media challenge I put on the players, the coaches. I really wasn't on it until like last week, and then I'm back off of it again. It's kind of good not to be on it. Kind of feel good about that.
This is Phil Callahan along with,
Clint Derringer.
and we continue our preseason preview. The first episode covered the offense, the second episode covered the defense, and now we're going to do our predictions for the season. But first things first, the word has come down from Sharon Moore.
Bryce Underwood will be our starting quarterback. I'll confirm that. He's earned the opportunity. It was not given to him. All the other quarterbacks had a really good camp as well. Really thought Jaden Davis has really come along and taken the next steps. He'll be the two behind him, and he's done a really good job. But Bryce took the necessary steps and really took the position. Took ownership of his abilities and took ownership of the team and became a leader on the team and a guy that guys look to. So, just did the things the right way and used his skill and never tried to do too much. For a young guy, very mature beyond his years, and he's still only 18 years old. So he's gonna make mistakes, but that's what we're here for. Coaches and players, we're all going to support him as he goes on this journey. We go on this journey together. So, but he's earned that job.
Probably not a surprise to most anyone who's been following the last couple weeks, but that's the news, and everyone will be looking to how Bryce does. Well, Clint, first game up is New Mexico. How do you see that game breaking down?
Well, New Mexico's got 75, I think, new players into their program. So total changeover of the entire system. The coach, Jason Eck, comes over from Idaho, who gave Oregon a little bit of a scare early in the season last year. So they've got a little bit of punch, a little bit to make you nervous on the offensive side of the ball. But of course, New Michigan's defense is really where our strength is. So I don't expect Michigan to have too much trouble putting this one away. But there may be a few hiccups. This is a team that definitely had the Ducks. When Eck was at Idaho, the Ducks were definitely sweating it into the fourth quarter last year. I don't expect that kind of drama for Michigan this year, but there's some high expectations with Underwood getting named the starter, and I think there may be still some growing pains that we talked about in the offensive podcast. I think we'll see a little bit of that. So I'm not sure that Michigan will cover the spread that they're expected. I've seen it as high as 36.5. I don't think that they've got quite that much, but I'm definitely picking Michigan to win. Right now, I'd look at something mid-30s, something like 35 or 38-7.
Well, we've definitely been hearing a lot of hype from inside the building about how energized this offense is. Chip Lindsey's been talking, the players have been talking, and it's interesting because whenever Bryce Underwood's name would come up, you could see players just kind of getting energized, and then they would kind of remember to themselves that they weren't supposed to go on and on too much about the quarterback battle until it was officially announced. So it's going to be interesting to me. We know a little bit more about the offense. I mean, besides that, Bryce is going to be the starter and Jaden is number 2. Jaden Davis is backing him up. But, we had the injury, unfortunately, that come out about Babaloa. And, Sharon has said that basically, the offensive line is going to be Evan Link, going to be Gio at left guard, Crippen at center, Brady Norton at right guard, and Andrew Sprague at right tackle. And I think this night game is going to be a great opportunity for them to have to deal with a little bit of noise, a little bit of distraction, But I'm really expecting the offense to come out and really kind of bust out. I mean, there's a couple different reasons. It's not all Bryce, right? I mean, I think we need to remember that, we have talented running backs. We're hearing that we have, Donovan McCulley has really taken over at wide receiver. We have Marlon Klein at tight end. So I think even if Michigan just primarily pounds the ball, which is, the one of the things that Sharon loves to do, loves to play that smash. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see if Michigan actually breaks into the 40s, and I would be shocked if New Mexico scores over 10. So I'm going to go a little bit different from you, just a little bit of a deviation. I'm going to say 42-7, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that's the same shape of a football game. It's just a matter of whether guy gets tackled before he breaks a long one or not. So we'll see. I definitely would be surprised if New Mexico scores more than twice. So anything above 14 would be a little bit of a surprise, depending on how that comes to be. But I expect complementary football. Let's see the defense give the offense some opportunity on some short fields, maybe, and put up a lot of points and put this one away early.
Expecting a big show for the home opener underneath the lights. Well, next game will be Oklahoma in Norman, also at in the evening. So, Clint, how do you think Michigan will do on their first big test on the road?
Well, it's the road trip really that is the most concerning for me. Oklahoma isn't a particularly, as far as SEC opponents go, Oklahoma is a good one to get. It's just a little bit of the younger leadership early in the season. I think that it's going to be more of a challenge, a road night game in Norman. So both teams are going to have pretty good defensive units. Um, for sure, we said Michigan's got to lead with their defense while the offense finds their footing. Um, I don't. I'm not particularly scared of Oklahoma's offense. We'll see what they look like under John Mateer, the new quarterback transfer. But um, this is going to be a really, really close game, and I think that Oklahoma probably finds a way to pull it out uh, by a field goal at home at night. But it's not like I don't think Michigan can win. And it would be a big statement if they can go on the road and get an SEC win for sure early in this season. But I have concerns about kind of the immaturity of the team early in the season. And if this game was coming later in the season, I think it would be a different story. But it's a tough challenge early second week to go on the road to Norman at night and to play your best. So I just think too many mistakes early in the season in this one, and I think we probably see Oklahoma hold on something like 26-23 or 23-20, something in that range.
So, I think this will be an incredible test for the offense. It's one thing to do well at home in the friendly environment that you're used to, and that's why I think it's great that they're doing the night game because there's going to be a little bit of sizzle against New Mexico to add to a little bit of discomfort, right? A little bit of difference. But to go on the road and when we look back, um, Michigan during the during as they were ascending, right? The road was a challenge for them. So it's going to be interesting to see if Sharon is able to push back against that with this squad. Now, I do see Michigan winning this game. I think it's going to be a 16-13 win. And I really see this as kind of the battle of the field goal kickers. And we have the better field goal kicker, with Zavada. So I do think we're going to, I think it's going to be a struggle. But I just think that Michigan's defense is really going to come out and put them in a stranglehold. And, then, as we've heard, Zavada hit a 70-yarder in practice, right? Wind assisted. But I could see the offense doing well enough just to put him in position to hit some long field goals. And when you see Zavada kicking a 50 or a 60-yarder, that's very disheartening for an opponent. So I'm hoping that that's enough to take the crowd out of it. So again, that's where I'm seeing that game.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Another strength of Michigan's team this year certainly is Zapata. So really, as soon as Michigan crosses the 50-yard line, they're kind of in scoring range. So that's a really good point. I think it's hard for me to imagine somebody putting up more than 23 or 26 points against this Michigan defense, but um, if the offense struggles the way that I think that they will, then some of those mistakes probably, lead to turnovers and handing over short fields the other way. And when you do that on the road, it can kind of snowball on you. So obviously, again, if Michigan plays a clean game, then they'll have every chance to win this. But it's going to be close into the fourth quarter. Certainly going to be a raucous environment, and um, I think you just lean toward the more experienced quarterback in that moment. And right now, that'll be Bryce's first opportunity, really in the pressure cooker, and we'll see how that goes. I think that he's capable, but you just need those. You need that time on task and those repetitions. I've kind of got to see it happen before I can predict it. So, um, yeah, I look forward to that one for sure. It's going to be exciting. And if Michigan steals a win on the road there, then that really kind of raises the ceiling for the whole season. So I'm really looking forward to that matchup with Brent Venables and Oklahoma. But if you like defense and X's and O's, we'll talk more about that stuff specifically leading into week 2.
My thought in this game is if Bryce comes out and is jittery, I can see Michigan just riding Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall. Okay, and that's where I kind of see it. I don't expect explosive touchdowns, 70 and 80-yard runs, but I do think that they can put him in position for field goals. So there's my thought there is that hopefully they can take a little bit of the pressure off of Bryce. And, the main thing is hopefully by, the second game, the offensive line is already worlds better than what we saw last year. And I think that's the key. If the offensive line starts to gel at this point, you take a lot of pressure off Bryce and things start to hum, but this will definitely be a huge challenge. Next up, Michigan returns to Ann Arbor to play Central Michigan. Well, Clint, how do you see this one?
Well, I think again, the way that I see the season unfolding, if they are coming back from Norman with a loss, then I expect that to kind of have a kind of a sobering feel for the team and really snap into focus. Um, and I expect them to bounce back and really put a really good performance together at home against a MAC opponent. So I think they come back home with some energy and looking to kind of move past whatever mistakes that we see in Norman against Oklahoma. And I think they put it on Central Michigan a little bit. Um, Probably have even a greater win margin than against New Mexico. I think right now I'm looking at something like 37-7 over the Chippewas in a bounce back win, getting ready to start the Big Ten season.
So I see this one differently just because I'm expecting a win over Oklahoma. So I'm expecting a little bit of a letdown uh, as such versus Central Michigan. Now, not enough of a letdown to lose, but I see Michigan winning this one by a score of 27-10. And again, just kind of a grinding performance where it may be a little bit close at halftime and then they pull away in the third quarter and everyone's happy. But again, so um, either way, whichever way you go with your predictions or my predictions, Michigan is seems to be trending well. We like to break the season down in quarters. So in their first 3 games, they're either undefeated or 2-1, and still playing well and looking good heading into the Big Ten season. So as we enter the second quarter of the season and the beginning of Big Ten play, we got Nebraska in Lincoln. How do you see this one, Clint?
Well, it's a very similar feel to me as the Oklahoma game, except you have the Oklahoma game under your belt. I think you're on the steep end of the Bryce Underwood learning curve, and I think he does just enough in the Nebraska game to eliminate mistakes. I still don't see this early in the season. I still don't see the offense being ready to go on the road and really light up the scoreboard. But I do think they'll be able to hold on to the ball and kind of embrace that punting is winning style of a game in Lincoln. So I see a really, really low scoring battle, and Michigan gets it done by one score, something like 21-14 or maybe 21-17. This next stretch here of the season to open the Big Ten portion of the schedule, they all of the teams are really, really closely packed together in the middle of the Big Ten. So we're going to know a lot about the pecking order of the conference as we get through the first half of the season, because a lot of these next few teams have very similar profiles in terms of where they are in SP plus, where their unit rankings are. And then a lot of it comes down to how well Michigan can travel and take their A game on the road. So I still think Michigan plays a little bit ugly here in Lincoln, but eliminates the mistakes to a degree that the defense can hold on, and Michigan wins. I'll say 21-14.
All right. Well, that is spot on with my prediction. I predict 23-13. And again, I am not expecting this Michigan offense, despite all of the big talk. I'm not expecting this to be explosive yet. I'm really expecting it to be a grinding, rely on the defense, and hopefully the offensive line is coming together, and that we're starting to see Bryce to find some rhythm with his receivers. And part of what I'm hoping at this point in the season is they're not blowing people out. They're not throwing because they don't have to. And I think back to the national championship season where Michigan just pounded the ball against Penn State because they could, right? I'm not expecting the offensive line to be that good yet at this point in the season, but I'm expecting it to be competent, and I'm expecting Michigan to really ride those high profile running backs. Again, I think Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall are going to be the stories of the first half of the season. And I think that if they can do that and the defense can come in and be as good as we believe they will be, I think Michigan will be looking pretty good as they head into the next game, heading back to Ann Arbor against Wisconsin. How do you see that one?
Well, Wisconsin is interesting under Luke Fickle. I think Luke Fickle is a really good coach. Certainly built a great program at Cincinnati. Took them all the way to the college football playoff when they were still outside the Power Five conferences. So I have a lot of respect for Luke Fickle and his ability, but his hiring of Phil Longo as the offensive coordinator, who's an air raid offensive coordinator the last couple of years, just never made sense at Wisconsin, right? If any school kind of embodies, a similar smash mentality as Michigan does, it's Wisconsin. So for them to really go air raid, I think they had a little bit of an identity crisis over the last couple of seasons, and they've started to get into alignment there. So I have more question marks about Wisconsin than answers. I'm glad that this particular game is at the Big House. I think we're going to start to see a pattern where Michigan plays better and above expectations at home, and maybe a little bit below expectations on the road. So again, coming back home, I believe, if I remember looking at the schedule, that the first bye week is between Nebraska and
Yep.
Wisconsin.
Yeah,
So
I was going to say that they have an extra week to prepare for this one.
yeah, absolutely. So extra time to prepare, but also any early season, bumps and bruises. Anybody that's dinged up kind of gets a little bit of extra time. So I like where this game is, even though I've got questions about how high the ceiling is at Wisconsin. I think they're going to be a solid middle of the road Big Ten program this year. Probably 7 wins, 8 wins, and but Michigan's going to do enough to win. Again, defense leads it, special teams, and this should be probably the first real inflection point where we're seeing the offense start to put in those second level counters to the counter. um, the offense should start to evolve, right? You got a couple road games and a couple big spots under your belt if you're Bryce Underwood, and I just see Chip Lindsey being able to kind of layer in some of the other pages from the playbook and take advantage of what they're laying down as a foundation in the first four games. So right now, I would say I'd pick Michigan like 31-10 over Wisconsin. Maybe maybe it's a little bit closer than that, but if we assume that both teams play clean, and no major no defensive scores or special team scores, then I think Michigan just slow and steady kind of pulls away from Wisconsin in the second half and wins 31-10.
I think the key to this game is that Michigan gets that bye week early. You have a time to kind of rest up, time to tune things. You have the offensive line gelling. You have the defense gelling as we're expecting. We're having Bryce get more comfortable, and I'm expecting, hey, I wouldn't be surprised by like a 37-10, a 37-13, very, very comfortable. Um, and I don't want to say a thrashing because I like that. I kind of define thrashing as 40 or 50 point win, but again, I see this game as Michigan controlling from the first quarter on and just kind of just pounding them. So again, feeling good, and next game up is a road contest, long road trip to USC to close out the second quarter of the season. Clint, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, as much as I like where Michigan caught Wisconsin, I hate this road trip to USC. Just throughout the history of the program, Michigan just does not play well on West Coast road games, even when they are the better team. And I think on a neutral field, I would pick Michigan to beat USC by somewhere between 7 and 10 points. But I hate this road trip. I just do not feel confident in this spot. USC's got problems. Again, I think Michigan is the better team on paper as I look at it right now. But again, probably get bitten a little bit by mistakes. We may start to see a couple mistakes on the defensive side, as guys, depending on how that depth is holding up at this point. And we know Lincoln Riley is going to be able to put points up in bunches. Whether they can be consistent is usually what determines whether he's got a great team or just a good team. So I think this is a good USC team, not a great team, but I expect USC to kind of give Michigan their second loss here. Probably, again, close. I'll say something like 27-24 with at least one score coming on a turnover on special teams. I don't have a great feeling here. When I look at the SP Plus projections, I think Michigan's offense should score about 35 in this particular spot if things play out the way that I think they should. But I think it's actually going to drop by about 11 points. They probably only put up in the low 20s here and drop one that is going to feel like a winnable game. And, I certainly hope that I'm wrong. But when I looked at the schedule, this is just one that I'm never going to have a bunch of confidence in this one. So I hope Michigan can prove me wrong and surprise me here.
Clint, you stole my thunder. When I look at this schedule, there's two things that I know. I know that Michigan will beat Ohio State. Just the way that the last couple seasons in the podcast, I predicted it throughout the whole year, looked forward to it. When I look at this game, this is the game that I think Michigan's going to lose. And, for many of the reasons you already said, Michigan historically has struggled to travel to the West Coast. And again, when I'm looking at what I envision as the roller coaster of this season, right? I envision them, being on a high after Wisconsin, maybe having a little bit of overconfidence, thinking they got everything figured out, then going on that long play ride, headed to the Coliseum against I would say, a foe that most will predict Michigan to win. And especially with the hype that I think Bryce will have heading into this game, I think USC is going to feel a little disrespected. I think Michigan may be a little bit over, maybe a little overconfident. And when I look at the schedule, this one just, I don't like it. And really, for everything you said, I mean, I just got a bad feeling about this. And, I'm really excited to go. I'm going to be there. Looking forward to seeing the Wolverines there. But I just have this feeling in my gut that there's going to be a lot of struggles here. And, we don't know when the game time is going to be yet. I'm expecting it's going to be later in the day, which is, um, gonna put a big focus on this game, right? It's going to be a lot of waiting around for the game, a lot of time to think, and again, with when you add the travel and everything else that's going to be going on, I think that I think the offense is going to struggle. I think you're going to see some turnovers, which will be the key to USC scoring in the 30s. I'm going to say, 35, and I'm going to say Michigan's going to struggle and end up with 17. And I really hope I'm wrong, but I've been meditating on this schedule for the last 6 months, and every time I go through all the different scenarios, this game comes up a dud. And I really hope I'm wrong. Just it worried me to hear you. We have not conferred before this podcast, but it doubly worried me to hear you say pretty much exactly what I was thinking. But in my scenario, this is Michigan's first loss of the season. In your scenario, this is Michigan's second loss. Uh, they head into the back half of the season, the third quarter. Hopefully a little bruised, but hopefully learning some important lessons. So um, the next game will be a return to Ann Arbor, Michigan versus Washington. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I think if you flipped this Washington game with the USC game that we just spoke about, um, you know, I would predict Michigan to beat USC at home, and I would predict Michigan to lose again if they went to Seattle this season. So it's more about home and road with me. I think the swings away from Ann Arbor and in Ann Arbor are going to be pretty big this year with with a young quarterback. So I think Michigan gets back to looking solid. Again, I think it'll be a somewhat low scoring, but Michigan gets back into the win column, something like 28-17. Again, probably leaves a little bit of meat on the bone offensively. If they kick a few field goals instead of score touchdowns, it might get a little bit closer. But for all of the cringiness I've got with Michigan going to the West Coast, when they have to come to Ann Arbor, we are kind of the beneficiaries of that, and I think Michigan will kind of leverage that and hold on, play a good game against the Huskies, and really, hopefully, this is the last week where I predict that we've got this kind of uneasy, still figuring things out. Again, I would call this like the second inflection point of the season where you're coming off a loss, you're kind of reframing your expectations on what the season's going to be, and now the locker room leadership is kind of solidified, right? The This is where I think guys like Max Bredesen and Gio Elhadi and Ernest Hausman, these guys are really going to say, it's time to tighten the screws and try to win out the rest of our games. So I think this is our last shaky performance in terms of a full team performance, but Michigan does enough to win against a West Coast team coming to Ann Arbor. So right now I've got it written down at 28-17 Michigan over Washington.
Well, I think Washington gets Michigan in reverse. They have to fly out here, And again, this is a Washington team that really had to reload last year, really had to rebuild after the national championship year. They're not nearly as loaded or in the position that Michigan is. I see this as a pretty easy pedestrian 30 to, or workman like performance 30-10. Michigan beats them. And I think that Michigan kind of comes back with a vengeance and the defense comes back with a vengeance and just again just strangles, just basically chokes the life out of them, and gives the offense enough to kind of find their footing. So next game, traveling up the road to East Lansing, Michigan, to face the Michigan State Spartans. How do you feel about this one, Clint?
Well, it's always a little bit uneasy walking into Spartan Stadium. There are some strange vibes for Michigan walking into that stadium. Typically, the games are a little bit closer than maybe they seem like they should be on paper. But the Wolverines are a better team. They're a better program. I am interested to see what they can do this season in East Lansing. I like the new head coach, but he just doesn't seem to me like he's got that same streak of hatred for Michigan that is kind of a prerequisite in East Lansing. So um, they may be getting a little bit sick of him by the time we get to this point in the season, depending on how how their schedule shakes out for them. So I think Michigan plays well. Again, a solid game, starting to eliminate mistakes, probably seeing a second pass threat, complementing Donovan McCulley on offense. And I really think that now Wink Martindale's probably really settling in, and that defense is making big plays. I also expect, the X factor on defense, Rod Moore, the fifth year senior safety. I think he'll be back by this point in the season, and that's just one more boost, especially emotionally for Michigan. So right now, I'm saying 27-9, and that's in a game that doesn't really feel that close. Michigan probably kicks a few field goals that should have been touchdowns, but 27-9 in a game that never really was in doubt, and Michigan extends the streak over Michigan State.
Well, the last time we were up there, it was that glorious 49-0 thumping. I'm not predicting that, but I do feel that this is it's hard to feel bad for Michigan State, but I think when I look at the way the schedule shapes up, that this isn't a real road game. Okay, I mean as far as travel goes, it's not the big trip across the country, the trip to Nebraska, the trip to Oklahoma. I think that while Spartan Stadium can be intimidating, I'm not expecting it to be that intimidating past the first quarter. I'm expecting Michigan to come in and really thump him. I think we're going to see the offense catch fire in this game. I'm expecting again not 49-0, but I'm thinking 42-3. I'll give the Spartans a field goal.
Yeah, I like Aiden Childs as a quarterback in East Lansing, but he's going to be under duress in this game. Like I said, I think Wink Martindale takes a step forward right about this point in the season. That defense gets its final ducks in a row here, and if Rod Moore is back and playing anywhere near 100% of his capability, then this is where we start to see opposing offenses really struggle. So while I do have some respect for what Michigan State's got going on, in this game, it's a bad matchup for them, and their quarterback's going to be running for his life, and he can be a little bit prone to making big mistakes and turning the ball over in those cases, and we'll probably see plenty of the roller coaster that is Aiden Childs in this game, in this Michigan State game.
All right, next game up to close out the third quarter of the season. Michigan returns to Ann Arbor to face Purdue. Poor Purdue. How do you see this game shaping up, Clint?
Yeah, it was pretty wild to remember that we played against Purdue in the Big Ten title game just a few years ago. It's like, man, it feels like they've been down for a long time. And then I had this flash that I think it was the 2022 Big Ten championship game that Jeff Brom had them, winning the Big Ten West. So that guy really has a pretty clear crystal ball. He got out of town just in time and took the Louisville job. And now, Ryan Walters never had the personnel as a first-time head coach. He never had the talent to really run the aggressive Don Brown style defense that he wanted to run. So he didn't last, and now we'll see. They've got a little bit more experience coming in at the head coach position, but everybody's transferring out from Purdue. A lot of guys transferring laterally to the Big Ten, but even some of their starters are transferring down, out of the Power Four conferences. So seemed like everybody's kind of abandoning the Boilermakers this offseason. So a little bit of a year zero for him. It's Barry Odom's the new coach in West Lafayette, and this one's going to be ugly. It's just a matter of how high on the scoreboard they want to run it up. I don't think that Purdue's going to be able to do a lot against Michigan's defense. Right now, I'm saying 42-10, and I think that the all 10 points probably come against the second or third stringers late in this one. So I would be surprised if this is a game past halftime. I think this is one where people are starting to look ahead into the final stretch of the season, and again, I think the previous week is really when everything starts to fit into place, and then Michigan gets another bye week after that Michigan State game. So Purdue is just in a really rough spot and catching Michigan probably just rounding into form and getting into its hitting its full stride. So the Boilermakers probably take this one on the chin.
If this game probably has the best chance for Michigan to really score in the 40s or 50s, my guess is that Sharon will pull some of the starters. So I think we're going to see a 42-10 game. Nothing too crazy, nothing too outrageous, but I think Michigan will pretty much own the first half and then coast through the second half. And again, just Purdue is outmatched here. And of course, there's a reason they play the games, but Purdue's going to have a rough time. So Michigan heads into the fourth quarter of the season. First game up, Northwestern. A little bit of sizzle by playing at Wrigley. How do you see this one shaking out?
Well, by this point in the season, as Michigan enters the fourth quarter of the season, now Bryce is no longer a true freshman, right? He's got 9 games of starting experience. They've figured out how to kind of fit the playbook to his skill set. They've probably figured out how to utilize more of the depth pieces. Northwestern is going to be better than they were last year, but they're certainly not a Big Ten title contender, not a very imposing offense or defensive unit, kind of middle of the pack in both metrics. As long as Michigan doesn't get caught kind of in the novelty and the weirdness of playing at Wrigley, as long as they stay focused, it's a relatively short road trip after doing some long road trips earlier in the season. So as long as they handle the business-like nature of this particular trip, then I don't foresee any major problems. I've got penciled in 33-6 right now. I could see them struggling a little bit to score if they get off to a slow start. But again, in my mind, I see the third and fourth quarter of the season being really Michigan playing at its best and kind of feeling the locomotive getting to go here, getting the momentum building. So no reason to slow it down here unless they lose some focus. But 33-6 against Northwestern at Wrigley feels about right to me.
And it's also an opportunity to talk about, Michigan has a bye week again before this. And I like how it sets up. Okay. Like some people would rather have the bye week before Ohio State, but, you know, that's too long of a gap. I think that you see teams lose a little bit of focus when they have 2 weeks to look. Now, we have no crystal ball and we don't know what kind of injuries we'll have. But right now, I like the idea of, you have the bye week after Purdue, and no disrespect to Northwestern or Maryland, but you have two tune-up games, and then you got Ohio State. So I see Michigan, winning 27-3 against Northwestern. Again, I think if I describe this team, it's workmanlike. It's just getting it done, and then getting up by a couple scores and just grinding the clock down, pounding the ball on the ground. So I'm not looking for a 30 or 40 point explosion here, but I do think it'll be a comfortable win. And then after this game, they head on the road to Maryland. How do you see that one?
Well, really, I think Maryland has more to do with how this game goes than Michigan does. They really showed signs last year of starting to come apart at the seams. It's possible that Mike Loxley might be on a little bit of the hot seat in College Park if they have a mediocre season to this point. Then it'll be a normal Michigan Maryland matchup. I expect Michigan to win that relatively easily, but not a blowout by any sense of the imagination. However, if Maryland gets off to a bad start and Loxley loses the locker room like it looked like he started to late last season, um, they might have folded up shop by the time they get to the 11th game of the season, week 12 or 13 with bye weeks. So um, if Maryland is still playing their best, then I think this will be relatively a normal game, maybe a little bit close at halftime, closer than we expected, but with Michigan getting up by a couple scores in the second half. Part of me thinks that Maryland ends up folding up the tent, and Loxley may or may not still be the coach when Michigan comes to town. So I've got this one a little bit lopsided, 35-3, but I wanted to make sure that I qualify that as, I think Maryland lost this game earlier in the season when they kind of quit on their coach as they showed signs of doing last year. If that's not the case, then this game's probably closer than I predict right now. But we'll see. We'll see how the Terps can hold it together this year.
I see this one as 27-13 and closer than you'd expect if you just looked at it on paper. Because, listen, it's going to be really hard for Michigan to not be looking ahead to Ohio State. And you can say, don't do it. You can tell them not to do it. The guys will say, we can guarantee it. They'll be talking about that they're not looking forward to it, but they are. And then after the game, when it gets to be Ohio State week, it will be all Ohio State, and you will see the difference in electricity and focus between Maryland week and Ohio State week. So, right now, you have Michigan with 2 losses heading into the Ohio State game. I have Michigan with 1 loss, and I've already predicted that they will win this game. But, again, lots of football, lots of time before the Buckeyes head to Ann Arbor. But how do you see this one breaking out, looking a couple months ahead?
The shape and general tone of the game, I think, is going to be very similar to the 2023 game. I think it's going to be very, very tight, back and forth, kind of a heavyweight slugfest with both sides, making big plays, and not quite the same gridlock that we saw last year in the 13-10 game. It's just, again, I think it's the experience, certainly of Bryce Underwood, and this game. The first time that you play in it, you're kind of a freshman all over again. And I have, I'm a little bit nervous that that jumps up and bites Michigan one last time in the season. So um, definitely doesn't have to be, the case. I think it's going to be a matter of who can make the big play in the fourth quarter. And when I look at their roster and I look at our roster, and I've asked this, offline personally with you in the past, is who is the person that's going to step up and make the play in the biggest moment. And if you look at the combined rosters in this game, the best player on either roster is Jeremiah Smith, the wide receiver in Columbus. So um, I think this is going to be kind of a pivotal moment in Bryce Underwood's career and in the rivalry with the Buckeyes. And I've got Ohio State holding on to a 1 point victory, um, and really, really setting the tone for the upcoming seasons and the ongoing battle back and forth here. And the questions will be whether or not um, whether or not Michigan has done enough at 9-3 to get a serious look as a playoff team. I think that's kind of where we're heading once we get to November. But if I'm wrong, then probably what we see is that Bryce Underwood is totally under control, and Chip Lindsey has fit that offense to him, and the run game is pounding the way that we've seen it in the past. But as much as I want to just kind of lean on what we've seen in the Michigan Ohio State game the last 4 years, I have to see it from this offensive line and from the true freshman quarterback before I can predict it. So I've got them dropping a close one in Ann Arbor to end the season here.
So when I look at this game, it reminds me of there was a stretch when I was in college um, where Michigan just owned Ohio State. It didn't matter how good the teams were on paper. There was just a, a mindset, uh, and it's interesting because with Lloyd, we saw it both ways. There was a stretch early, the beginning of his career where he owned Ohio State, and at the end he didn't, and it flipped. Right, he was the same coach, but it went from owning Ohio State to, I always tell the story. One of my best friends in college was from Virginia, and our senior year, he said, I don't even consider Ohio State a rival. We beat him so much. And I shushed him, told him to shut up. I said, and appreciate this stretch because it will change, right? And but understand that's how it was. Like if you didn't know the history of Bo and Woody, there was a stretch where Michigan just whomped on them. And then Tressel came in and it flipped the opposite way, right? There were teams where Michigan was better and just came up just short. So we definitely went into a stretch where Ohio State owned Michigan. Okay. And you mentioned Fickle. I always appreciate that he gave Brady Hoke his one win over Ohio State, right, in that gap year. But really, it flipped and Ohio State owned us. Okay. And it took a few years for Jim to flip it back, and now it's the weirdest thing, Clint. I've been down to Columbus where Michigan was supposed to win and didn't. I've been down to Columbus where Michigan wasn't expected to win last year and they did. And to be on that field and see um, the behavior of the Ohio State players before the game, on the sidelines after the game, they they just don't understand why they're losing. Okay, so you say, well, I need to see this Michigan team beat them. I need to see an Ohio State team think they can win. Okay, and it's weird because I go player by player, and man, Ohio State stacked. They were stacked last year. Okay, and I had a sense. I knew Michigan was going to win last year. I knew it, and I was not going to miss it. Right, and you know, Ohio State went on and won the national championship, and I love that on all their gear where they put the scores of the season, it has that great big Michigan loss, right? And they can say it doesn't matter, but you know it does. And there's just a sense of um, a sense of doom and foreboding that I think Ohio State has right now. Now, there will have to be a leader who steps up. Okay. And I think about the first game that Tressel came up here and won, you know, when to start their streak. Michigan was expected to win. They switched quarterbacks the week of. Oh my gosh, we're going to kill them. And that team just flipped the switch. Okay. And I don't know when or how Ohio State will do that. Okay. So the same way that you need to see Michigan, you know, come together, I need to see Ohio State be as good as they are on paper. That's what I need to see. And it's weird to have been in the stadium in the horseshoe last year and look around and it just be quiet. And to see the nonsense of way the you know, like a bad high school team, they were barking at Michigan in the tunnel. I mean, just amateurish. Okay. And just, you know, Michigan scoreboard. Scoreboard's all you need to say, right? So I, you know, I people will say I said it half jokingly. No, there's a game that I know we'll win, and this is it, because Ohio State's going to have to show me. I'm going to have to see it on the scoreboard, because for the last 4 years, they're beat before the game even starts, and again, they were able to win the national championship last year. I'm fine with that. I mean, hey, rock on, go Big Ten, right? I will take that day down in Columbus that showed them who they really were, right? And if them winning the Big Ten, or if them winning the national championship showed anything, it shows how dominant the Big Ten is right now. Okay, and you know, go Big Ten. We're a monster, getting stronger, and you know, I don't know if Michigan's going to go to the college football playoffs. My projection is there. I see one glaring loss on this schedule. Okay, and if they only have one loss and they beat Ohio State, they'll go to the college football playoffs. Okay. I don't know if they're going to go to the college football playoffs. You know, I don't know how the rest of the games are going to play out, but I do know that Michigan will beat Ohio State. And I see it as a 27-17 game. And, you know, another year where Ohio State hopes they can pull it together and go on a run that will erase all the bad memories. But I think that them winning the national championship only makes the Michigan game hurt worse last year, as much as they want to pretend it didn't. You know, to be the man, you got to beat the man, and they haven't beat the man in a while. And it's just, it's amazing to see. You know, having seen rivalries both at the high school level and the college level and the pro level, this is just one of those things where spiritually, Michigan owns Ohio State right now. And it doesn't mean they can't lose. They still need to perform. They still need to stay focused. But the last couple years, you talk to the players at Schembechler Hall, and there is just a vibe. There is just a spirit of dominance of, you know, we don't have to, we're not waiting to see what's going to happen. We just have to show up and make it happen. Like it's predetermined. And it's you know, hey, they're going to play the game. That's why we watch. That's why we go. But just like when the rivalry flipped, I knew that Michigan was going to beat Ohio State. I had that feeling. And it pains me to this day that I got diagnosed with COVID that morning and had to watch the game on TV. And one of the reasons it irked me so bad is I knew I was going to miss a win. I knew it. I knew as I watched the game from 8 miles away what I was missing, right? And there are times in a rivalry where it flips. And you know, maybe we're getting back to the the good old days where it's going to go back and forth every game. But right now it seems like it's flipped for Michigan, and hey, they hired Matt Patricia. Good luck with that, right? If that's your solution, okay. I mean, um, you know, people in the Michigan area are well familiar with his skills. And again, I feel that we just own Ryan Day right now. That's how it feels.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. I catch those same feelings without a doubt. I would say my expectation last year after Michigan stole one in Columbus, I thought if it was still a 14 playoff and Ohio State didn't have to prep for a playoff game coming up, Ryan Day would have been fired after that loss to Michigan. The expanded playoff saved his career um, at that moment, and I thought, okay, it might extend it by a couple weeks, but if Tennessee comes in here and bombs Ohio State, he gets fired right after that game. So I was really looking forward to when they eventually ran out of steam in the playoff and Ryan Day getting sacked, all because of the fallout of that Michigan win. And it didn't happen. Somehow he was able to galvanize that team and they went on a run. And not only did they win the national championship, they dominated the rest of the field, including Oregon at the Rose Bowl. So um, I think that says at least something for what they've got going in the program right now. Um, I agree that Michigan still has a huge psychological advantage, and of course, the game being in Ann Arbor is going to help a ton for this team. Um, and we'll see. I just think it's going to be a well played football game, and somebody is going to have to make a crucial play in the fourth quarter to win that game. And if you put a gun to my head and told me to pick one name, who do I think that person's going to be? Um, I think it's going to be number 4 from the Buckeyes. And I really, really, really hope that somebody in maize and blue proves me wrong, and I'll be the first one to put my hand up and own it while we all celebrate. But it's somebody's going to win that game in the fourth quarter, and we'll see who it is.
Clint, to your point, okay, everything you said, when Ohio State played anybody but Michigan, they were amazing. When they had to look across the line and see Michigan, they didn't believe they were going to win. And it's again, you go player by player on the roster. Michigan had no business winning in Columbus last year, except they were Michigan and Ohio State was Ohio State. And the player that I see making the difference is Rod Moore.
Like Ernest Hausman said to the team, we are starving. We are not hungry. We are starving. And mentioned a reference that we talked about his going back to his homeland and seeing people eat and how fast they eat because they're starving. They're not hungry. And I think our kids are starving. They're starting to be successful, starting to be great. And I just can't wait to watch them play. I know we play on Saturday, but I wish it was tomorrow because I think they'd be ready to go.
Are you starving too?
100%. 100%.
If there's any player that's starving, it's Rod Moore. Okay. I've talked about it on the podcast. I talked to Rod Moore right before he went on the field at the national championship. Okay. When the trainers were working on him to get him ready for that game. And to think that that's the last time he played football? I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, in a game, that's the last time he played. And, you're talking about a player who has NFL talent and aspirations. I mean, he's chomping at the bit. And I think that if Ohio State is going to throw the ball, well, I'm looking for Rod to get the job done. So, it will be a great football game. It's why we watch the game.
Mm-hmm.
And, the other player that I think could be the difference is just Ernest Hausman. Okay. And we talk all about how great Michigan's line is, and they are. But Hausman is just a beast from sideline to sideline. Okay, and I think he's only going to be better this year. So I think the national media is sleeping on how good Michigan's defense is consistently, and I think it got clouded last year by how bad the offense was. Okay, and the offense was putrid. Don't get me wrong, right? We've talked about it, but if you add, woulda, shoulda, coulda, you add a competent offense last year, Michigan's probably a college playoff team, right? And if the offense catches gear, which I really think they will, but I think the offense catching gear isn't scoring 40 or 50 points. It is being that boa constrictor. Hey, the defense is going to smother you, and we're just going to pound the ball. Oh yeah, and every couple downs, Bryce is going to go over the top, right? And we're going to pound it to the tight end, and we're not going to knock you out. We're going to hit you we're just going to jab you, jab you, jab you, jab you, jab you until you're done, right? And that's how I think Sharon is trying to build this offense. And again, you and I have talked about it. It's going to come back to the offensive line. Okay, if they can be competent and get good. But if you were to tell me with certainty that the offense line is going to be solid by the second or third game, which I think is going to happen. I think Michigan is going to shock people. You know, we have this monstrous conference now, right? I don't know if Michigan is going to win the Big Ten. I don't know if they're going to go to the Big Ten championship because there's so many other teams that have a chance to go undefeated and possibly nose them out. But I believe, I know they're going to beat Ohio State, right? The question is, how quickly do they get good before that? And do they drop, 2 or 3 games before that happens? I don't think it happens. I really think that USC game is going to be the wake up call, and we're going to see this. We're going to see this team really catch gear. And as excited as it has been to watch JJ and Blake and Donovan Edwards, um, you start looking at the team. If Bryce is half as good as they say, the next couple years could be just as exciting, right? And it's just a question of when and how, and you know how quickly the team catches gear. I love the schedule where they're alternating home and away, because I think one of the things that really hurt Michigan in the past is they'd have a month of home games, and then they'd kind of get thrown in the deep end at an away game. So I like this going back and forth. I would set it up this way, and I even like where the buys are. So I really think a lot of things are gearing up for Michigan to be really solid and perhaps spectacular this season.
Yeah, I can hear that. It's certainly a favorable schedule. I think Michigan is trending toward uh, really getting back on the kind of national championship footing a year or two from now. Maybe not next season, maybe the season after that in 2027. Um, but for this year, I think offensively, what Michigan is shooting to be is that 2021 offense under Cade McNamara. Not exactly that style. Bryce Underwood is not Cade McNamara directly. I'm not making that comparison. But in terms of metrics and numbers, which is kind of where I spend most of my time and energy, I think Michigan is going to try to be that level of efficiency, that level of scoring offense in 2021. And that was good enough to beat Ohio State and to win the Big Ten title. So if they can accomplish that and be the 2021 offense from a number standpoint, then that would be good enough to be a championship level football team. We certainly would take that. And I don't think that this offensive line is going to be able to get to the level that offensive line did. Again, that unit won the Joe Moore Award. I just don't think that this unit is going to get to that same tier.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think we got so used to outstanding offensive line play And then we had last year, which was really subpar, that
Yeah,
it was a shock to the system.
it
And
was. It was definitely.
and we learned like I'll say me, right? We had those 2 years where we just reloaded and just kept just dominating, and you know, loving to watch offensive line play the way I do. It was just glorious. It was glorious, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you look at those players when they went to the NFL, there's nobody really dominating. There's nobody who's just completely like, superstar at the NFL level, but they were amazing at the college level. They were right at that tipping point where they're about as good as you're going to get in college, and they stuck around for a couple years, right? And it's just it really need to go back and look at those games and appreciate how dominating. I mean, like Zach Slinner goes out and they just plug a guy in and they don't miss a beat, and that is the epitome of they like to say, hey, we want to have 8 or 9 guys interchangeably. That really doesn't work. That's a great theory, but Michigan was as close to that working for those 2 years as I've ever seen any other team.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and on the defensive side, if I'm comparing again, I see and feel a lot of the 2022 defensive unit that was led by Mike Morris. Right, the 21 season had a lot of star power. Aiden Hutchinson goes to the Heisman final, a finalist for the Heisman. Dax Hill is kind of your edge defender in the box on the other side. The way Mike McDonald uses him, he basically killed the half of the field because he had Hutchinson and Dax Hill on the on the strong side of the formation. So Ojabo emerges, right? It was just so star studded of a unit that when they moved Stainer still from offense to defense in 22, we had questions, but they were confident. How are you going to replace all world athletes up front? Then it was Hutchinson. This year it's Grant and Graham. So I've got that feel of, man, this defense, like you said, I think is better than people would give it credit for because they're better than they lost a lot. They're going to take a step back at defensive tackle, but I think they're going to be better everywhere else. So if the defense is allowed to lead this team and the offense can just stay out of the way and not make mistakes and give away some crucial games, especially early in the season, then your predictions are not that much different than mine, right? We're talking about a difference of a couple interceptions or a couple turnovers or a couple bad decisions that end up kind of putting your defense out there on a short field more than they can handle. So if you've got the 21 offense and the 22 defense and they can play complementary football, then this team definitely has the capability of getting to the college football playoff and maybe even to the Big Ten title game. But I think that would be the ceiling. Again, just like that 21 season, this team feels like they would be really, really accomplishing something to get to that level. Whereas in 22, it was the expectation, and in 23, it was Michigan versus everybody, and they still made it happen. So this feels like kind of a foundational year. Like, where can you set the floor? Because this is where we're going to build from for the next 2 or 3 seasons.
So the reason that I feel so good about the offense this year, and this may be counterintuitive, but I'm completely zeroing out what happened last year, okay, on offense. Last year's offense was so monumentally bad, okay, that I feel like it has skewed our expectations for a competent offense, okay. And again, not taking a shot at any individual on the offense, but the combination of the offensive line play being so intermittent that you really, if you had a decent offensive line, I believe any three of those quarterbacks could have been really good. Okay, but going back and watching the games, it was I remember why I was so pissed last year, right? Because you went from amazing offensive line play to just who's going to screw up today, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
really, who's going to screw up this play? I mean, it was you had no steady performers. It was really a mess. Okay, so it's interesting because one of the things that a lot of people focus on is that, you know, Link had like a horrible, horrible grade for a game or two last year. Okay, but that in my mind, that's not the problem. Remember, he's the best they had. Okay, and I always tell people that it's not like there's a better guy sitting on the bench and the coach, didn't play him.
It's just like I tell the players. I've never coached with anybody, an assistant coach, that didn't want to play the best players.
When you see a guy struggling, he's the best they have and he's doing the best he can, right? So what you had last year is you had Geo being intermittent, and Geo was supposed to be the rock. Okay. So when you have different guys that you can't rely on, like you can't say, well, we can rely on the right side. Well, one quarter you could and one quarter you couldn't, right? Or we can rely on the left side. Well, one quarter you could and one play you couldn't. That's what was so infuriating, is that you didn't know what to expect. So the offensive line was breaking down in different places, by the minute. And when specifically in the Indiana and Illinois games, you've heard me say this. I didn't drive all that way to see him lose. I really thought the team was coming together. And then you saw the offensive line gel versus Northwestern, and then you saw them play their best game against Ohio State. That's what I thought where we would be halfway through the year. Okay. And that's why I really am pointing to this long road trip at USC to kind of show me what you got, right? Show me what you have. Um,
Hmm.
Again, I'm going to the game. I'm not expecting. I'm not going thinking they're going to lose, but I have a bad feeling that there's a lot of gears, a lot of factors working against them.
Yeah, I would say offensively, you upgraded in talent at quarterback. Bryce Underwood was the number one recruit in the country for a reason. And, he's young, he's going to make mistakes, but the talent is undeniable. So that's obviously a huge upgrade over last year. We talked about how Davis Warren might be the, third or fourth stringer here on the full depth chart. So you certainly upgraded the talent in the quarterback room. The offensive line all gets a year older and stronger and comes together a little bit earlier this season. I think that's a good upgrade. But the singular biggest upgrade is at offensive coordinator. I expect Chip Lindsey to successfully fit the personnel and the playbook to Bryce Underwood. And the thing that drove me the craziest last year was just seeing guys in positions that didn't make a ton of sense, and one play call did not build into the next play call. Right? It was there just was not a theme. There was not a communication. There was not a connection across personnel and play calling. And I think that was it kind of trickled down into the individual performances that we saw. So
Well, Clint,
we,
I will agree with you on that, and that the way Donovan Edwards was used last year was coaching malpractice.
mhm,
And you know, people will talk about how Donovan would talk a lot, right? That he didn't go off last year about the way he was misused says a ton about the way he was a team player. Because just shaking my head, right? Just
mhm,
thinking back to it, it's like, what are you doing? You know, um, it's really coaching is not that difficult. Get your best players on the field, right?
mhm,
And I always look back to you know the Rich Rod era when they lost to Toledo. Okay, which I will say was one of the worst games I have ever seen in my life. And I would say if you let me pick Michigan's best 11 players and Toledo's best 11 players, and we play in the parking lot of Michigan Stadium, we will kick their ass, right? And because they were just that better, but they didn't play it, right? They didn't show it. At that point, the scheme wasn't working. Of course, the scheme didn't really work, but what was so frustrating about that game is that we had so much talent and didn't show it, right? What was frustrating last year was you had guys with talent and they weren't on the field, and you shake your head, right? So I agree with what you said. I'm really interested to see what Chip Lindsey brings, and I think that it's going to be the combination of Chip Lindsey and Bryce Underwood, and again these running backs you got.
Yeah.
It's
Donovan McCulley
it's
is an
yeah.
upgrade too.
Oh yeah. Oh for sure. I mean you got it at every position. I mean there's a reason he's got the number one jersey, right?
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, you stand next to him. Michigan has not had that kind of size at wide receiver in a very long time. Okay, like he gives the impression of just throw the ball up, he'll get it, right? Like, hey, when you're in doubt, this guy has the athletic skills to bring the ball down with his size and his strength. So I think really looking forward to this season starting. Really looking forward to talking Michigan football with you, Clint. Glad that you're back. Looking forward to it. You have any final words for the podcast?
No, this is it's like Christmas Eve in the summer. This is as good as it gets in terms of football feelings. So I'm excited to get into it, and we'll know really early. We'll know really early whether which path we're kind of following here, and I'm excited for it.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer,
Go Blue.
go blue.
I think he'll embrace it. I think he kind of likes it. And I think he also turned it into fuel. He doesn't really get it into the point where he makes it about himself. I asked him a question like, "What's his goal?" And it was just me and him. He said, "Do everything I can to help my team win." That's it. Like that's all you want to hear. And all those other things, I think everybody has individual goals and they should have them. But ultimately, you should be about the team, and he definitely is about the team and wanting to make sure the team is at their best. So there is hype, but that's what happens when you're the starting quarterback in Michigan. That's what you ask for. So they all deal with it, and that's why we're all here to help them.
Thank you for listening to the umgoblue.com podcast. All rights reserved.